Welcome back to React Native Radio Podcast. Brought to you by the wonderful Kitty Terminal. I just switched and I really like it. Episode 356, Building Vercel's V0 mobile app with Fernando Rojo.
Welcome back, React Native Radio fans. We have another fun episode here for you. And as always, I'm Mazen, she's Robin, and we're React Native Radio. Today, we have Fernando Rojo on the show with us. Welcome, Fernando.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Do you mind introducing yourself to our listeners, for those who don't know who you are?
Yeah, sure. My name is Fernando. I work at Vercel as the head of mobile. Before joining Vercel, I was working on a number of open source projects centered around using React Native and the web together. And that's how I landed here. Most notably, a project called Solido, which lets you share code between your website and your mobile app by combining Next.js's APIs with React Native and Expo apps, in addition to a number of other open source libraries. And at Vercel, I've continued working on a number of open source things. Most recently, we released the mobile app for V0, which is on the App Store for iOS. And that lets you work on new projects, new things using AI. And recently, we actually rewrote things such that you can work on any GitHub repo from the mobile app.
Awesome. Yeah, that's basically going to be what we're kind of dig into more to learn a little bit more about the V0 app. And for our listeners, React Native Radio episode 224 was the one where we had Fernando on. And I believe we spoke about Solido exclusively. I know it was Next.js and React Native was the conversation there. And that was early on when I started on the podcast. And I believe we had John Major as the other co-host.
Yeah, that was quite a while ago.
Yeah. So nice to have you back on.
Yeah, it's nice to still be working on this stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right. Well, before we get into the topic, let's hear from the sponsor. Infinite Red is a premier React Native consultancy located fully remote in the US. We're a team of 30 senior plus level React Native developers and support staff and have been doing this for over a decade. If you're looking for React Native expertise for your next project, hit us up at infinite.red/radio. Don't forget to mention that you heard about us through the React Native Radio podcast. All right. So let's talk about the V0 app. You kind of hinted a little bit about it, but can you give us a little bit? We're on a longer elevator pitch. We're in that Manhattan Skyline 200 whatever floor elevator. What's the elevator pitch for that?
Yeah, V0 in its shortest form is like the evolution of your Apple Notes app, where your ideas get built for you in the background. So you can open our app on your phone, and you see a text box like any other AI app, and you can send it a message, and in the background, you get an agent that spins up that's going to actually generate a website for you. And if you swipe your finger over to the right, you'll actually see a preview of the website that it makes for you. So we have a web view embedded in the app, and there you can get a real-time preview, exactly what you'll see on Safari on the actual app. Additionally, you can chat with it like any other general-purpose agent. If you want to import a real project, you can just press the plus icon in the bottom corner, and that'll let you import a repo. And V0 will let you chat and submit pull requests directly to that repository.
Wow, that's really cool. I actually downloaded it and tried it out, and it's super slick having the preview. You just like slide to the right, and it like you're previewing the website that you just asked an AI agent to build. We're living in the future for sure. We're talking about a React Native app that builds websites because Vercel is like it's a web focused company. In the blog article that we'll link in the show notes about how you built this app, you talk about how this is a web-focused company, but so building a native app was a really new territory. It was a new challenge. I assume that's partly why they brought you in. So I'm curious how that went for you, bringing your like mobile expertise to a company that was really only good at building websites.
Yeah. Vercel has always very much prioritized the web. I think the web is really in the DNA of the company, making the web fast and secure. And mobile was really like a new frontier, even prioritizing building mobile clients for our existing products. And I think it was a really good learning experience, even for the company generally, to see what are opportunities to improve our APIs and anything that we have right now in our dev cycle to make sure that mobile apps are also considered. Mobile has different constraints than web. You have a different release process, which you have to consider. You have stability of APIs and versioning for internal APIs that you have to consider, because mobile clients can stick around for months, whereas websites tend to get refreshed very often. For websites, you have things like SKU protection, which Vercel has a pretty good support for, where if you redeploy a new version, but someone's on an old one, they can still hit the old backend, right? So there were a lot of things like that existed for Vercel tailored to the web. And in the experience of building V0 Mobile, we turned a lot of those tools into things that we used additionally on the app. Another example is feature flags. Another example is feature flags. Vercel has a feature flags functionality that the entire V0 product was built on, but Vercel had never really considered how does that work for a native app. And so in the process of building V0 Mobile, we added native support for Vercel flags and many other of our features to make sure that we were getting our whole product suite up to par for other native devs to use.
Did you find that it was pretty easy to bring people who were familiar with like React and sort of webbish paradigms like into the React Native world? Did that happen pretty easily?
Somewhat. I would actually say it was a bit stranger than I expected. At the start, we were actually a bit open-minded about what tech stack we were going to use for our native apps. I have been a fan of React Native for a long time, and I've used it quite a bit, but nonetheless, I think it's always important to kind of start from scratch and just work backwards from the user experience. So we did not say we're going to build a React Native app and let's use V0 Mobile as a test case. Instead, we had a very clear set of guidelines of what we wanted to achieve with this mobile app, and we explored using SwiftUI and UIKit. At one point, we even sort of explored making our own bespoke framework for it to see if there was any reason to do that. And of course, we tried React Native as well. And there are a number of trade-offs between each one, between anything from development speed to iteration speed to low-level control. And the place we ended up was a React Native Expo app and a philosophy of being very willing to drop down to low-level code and to write native modules, to patch native code, to update React Native core. We maintained a fork of React Native for a while until we were able to upstream our patches. So in that sense, it wasn't difficult to get React people on board with React Native, I would say. That's actually not something I really did at all, transparently. I wasn't like onboarding web devs into our React Native code base very much. If anything, we have a team of native experts on the Vercel mobile team, and it was primarily people actually of a Swift background who are working on the native app. So I think that's been very critical. I really do like getting down to very low-level code when needed if something doesn't feel quite right. So that's where we made that change, and that adjustment generally was more with native devs coming to React Native rather than web devs.
Makes a lot of sense.
I want to dig into a little bit. So you talked about your tech stack. You started evaluating all of the options. You landed on Expo React Native. Why were the rest disqualified? And what was the deciding factor to come onto React Native?
Yeah, I think SwiftUI was a difficult one for me. It's always hard to completely rule something out before you actually make something with it. On the one hand, there's just my experience was biasing me towards React Native in some way, which is I knew how to make something in it quite well. But what I hadn't seen done was a really good chat experience. And so I did feel like I was going in a bit blind on how would I achieve these things. And my initial thought was using SwiftUI or UIKit might be the only way to get the flow that I want. And so I started building just prototypes of what are the kinds of experiences we want in SwiftUI, React Native, and UIKit. SwiftUI was maybe the easiest one for me to rule out. I actually think it's awesome, and I really do like it. But I felt like it was stuck in this bit of a weird middle ground where it solved so many things, but I would hit a wall and really struggle to escape out. And I felt like it would actually get me further by default than React Native would, but the escape hatches felt worse. And so out of the gate, it was a bit easier for me to disqualify that. I find that with React Native, because it's all eventually mapping to UIKit, it's somewhat easy to escape out.
You can abandon the JavaScript and just basically write a Swift app.
Yes. I think with the exception of view controllers, it's all been quite straightforward to drop down from React Native into UIKit. And yeah, the last piece was, do we just go, what would be called Pure Native, just a UI kit approach. And I wasn't quite convinced ultimately. Like originally the concern there would be performance, that React Native couldn't be performance enough. And back in the day, I do think that was a very legitimate concern. I think that's gone away a bit. And the next one was more, can a React Native feel polished and as good as a, pure UI kit app? And through all the tests I did, I did come to the conclusion that it could be, as long as we were willing to not just be stuck in JS land and escape when we needed to. And I think that panned out pretty well as a bet, especially as things like Opus came around, because it's really good at just doing a lot of scaffolding and, pairing up the native side with TypeScript types, and it'll rebuild the Nitro specs for you. It'll just handle a lot of these like more annoying parts of building native modules historically. So that's how we landed on this balance that we have. And it's actually part of the reason why we don't have an Android app.
Interesting. Oh, interesting. Yeah. I know we want to dig into performance a little bit, but I want to just go back to like the tech stack real quick. Any other third-party packages you want to give a shout out to that you're using in your app that, are well built and very performant that, you'd like to give a shout out to?
V0 uses a number of awesome third-party packages, most notably Unistyles. I've really enjoyed this for styling. I actually made one of the first styling libraries for React Native, which was called Dripsy. And I know how difficult it is to get all these things right. I remember at the time I built Dripsy, I was looking a lot into building like a compiler on the JS side that would help optimize, and React Native has a lot of render sensitivity and all these problems I would always have in order to implement something as simple as like dark mode or other things like that. And Unistyles has been a quite elegant solution to it. I have my issues with it, which I've told Jacek, and he's been super receptive to the feedback. I'm not a big fan of having to declare styles outside of components. I do miss inline styles, a few things like that, but I think the trade-off is well worth it. I think agents have been quite good at writing Unistyles code because it's so similar to Stylesheet. Then for keyboard handling, we use the keyboard controller. I think it's the de facto React Native keyboard handler at this point. Of course, using Reanimated for styles and animations in particular has been critical. And we use Zigo for our menus so that all the menus have a very native feel. For the swiping interaction on V0, this is kind of like our core interaction. We use React Native page review. We actually worked with CallStack to rewrite that to use SwiftUI because we actually found a bug in UIKit's implementation of the page controller. And it turns out that for whatever reason, I believe it's a tab view in SwiftUI, doesn't have the same issue, where UIKit was slightly misreporting the scroll position in certain cases. And as a result, we weren't able to do this blur interpolation properly. So we worked with them to rewrite that to SwiftUI, and instead of just forking it, so that we originally had a fork and then we upstreamed that with them. So we're using the page review for that. And then the last piece I'll mention is Nitro modules. We've made a lot of Nitro modules ourselves. We use Unistyles, which is a Nitro module, and we're actually working on a public Nitro module right now that I'm super excited about.
That's awesome. It seems like you've really taken a lot of ownership of the third party like libraries that you choose to bring in. It's not just like, oh, whatever's in it is what we're using. You're very much like actively working with the maintainers and contributing back. Was that something you set out to do intentionally, or did it just sort of like happen when you needed to make your tools do what you needed them to do?
I guess I'd never really considered another way of doing it. Part of the reason I always made libraries of my own is because I was very particular about how I wanted things to work. And I really like owning code. My bias over time has been towards having fewer and fewer dependencies, owning more code, and going towards a ShadCN approach of distribution of code generally, where things are more copy-pasted in a way. And because of that, I think it's when I'm adding a third-party dependency, especially one that has native code and that is low level and it's going to be in every single React component, such as a styling library, I think it's a huge deal. So I want to really understand how everything is working, or at the very least know that we can contribute and help make it better for ourselves and others.
The way that contributes back to the community is super important, that like the people like you that are like doing so much innovative work are not just like keeping it in your own app, and that it's like you're giving it back to the community. So like, we really appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the strength of React Native, right? So many large companies, whether it's enterprises or just smaller companies are using React Native, but then also giving back to the smaller startups they're trying to run quickly and kind of get their ideas and apps off the ground. And that's the great thing. That's what makes React Native so great. The community that always gives back to the code bases, finds these little interactive bugs that, like you mentioned, the like pager view one. I use pager view on my app, so I'm sure if I upgrade it, I'm gonna leverage that feedback that you all gave them and help them with. So I think that's amazing.
And you also contributed back to React Native itself, correct?
Yes,
You worked with Meta, yeah.
That's right. Yeah, we worked with a number of the people both at Meta. We got some help from some awesome people at CallStack and Expo. I don't know if every like software open source community is like this, but I do think React Native is quite collaborative. I've always found that, and I do think that the more you put out there and help people out, the more people seem to want to also help merge your PRs.
Yeah, exactly. You don't get very far if you're just like, hey, this is broken, fix it.
Yeah. I think that there were some things that bothered me for so long, like modal flickering as you would drag your finger and a few little things like this that I just simply could not shake. And before being at Vercel, I never really considered diving deep enough to take the time to fix something like that. I think it's just very much in the company DNA to care about those kinds of things, both for our own product and also just fixing that for everyone. I think that's been a very unique thing for me. I just passed my 1 year mark here, and it's a very unique part of the company where we just view open source as part of what we do, and there's no real reason that you would spend all the time to do that and then upstream it, other than the fact that you just want everyone to have this and you want it to work better. I think I want this tech stack that we've invested in to actually be as good as possible. And I think the good news is there are a lot of people who improve it constantly. Like most of the improvements that have happened to React Native have, with the exception maybe the new architecture and some recent updates, but over the last 5 years, I feel like it's mostly just been third-party devs, a lot of the agencies in the space and just people making really great libraries and pushing it forward. And so I think that's a very important piece.
We have a colleague here at Infinite Red, Mark Rickert, who did a talk at Chain React a number of years back called Outrage Driven Development, and that sounds a lot like what you're talking about. You find the pain and you fix the pain because you want things to be the best they can be. Speaking of making things the best they can be, I want to go back to performance and the sort of native level of performance that you were going for. In the blog article, you talk about wanting to make this app worthy of an Apple Design Award and sort of being up there with the Notes app or, the native Apple apps that just feel so good. How did you go about making the performance what you wanted it to be? How did you measure it? How did you know when to go down into native? Sort of how did you approach meeting that goal that you set for yourself?
Really by using the product a lot and constantly, I would say. I don't think I had a very formal process other than the way I knew it felt good enough was by using it a lot and feeling like it felt right. I think there are times where there are technical reasons something felt obviously incorrect, and other times where you're just using it and it feels a bit off and you're like, oh, why is this? One thing I thought was interesting is we built a nice waveform animation for our voice audio recording, and that's just built in Swift UI. And our voice module itself is actually a Nitro module. And the reason for that is I remember when we were recording our audio and it's getting transcribed, you would press the button and there would be this very subtle delay from when the recording state would appear. And that was really, really bugging me because I would expect to tap it, it turns red, but it would wait a second, maybe, I don't know, call it 200 milliseconds. But it wasn't instant. And that was very confusing to me. And it turned out that the library we were using, I think, was only meant to work on the old architecture. And there was some reason for that everything was quite slow. And we tried to reproduce it first in just pure UI kit. How long does it take from when you tap a button to when your thing is recording? And it was instant. And so the fix for that was, all right, let's just try to make a Nitro module. We did that and it worked right away. And obviously we were able to do some timings and things like that, but there's no real way I would know I didn't like that until I was tap on the street, trying to, have an idea. I type it, I start saying some words, and it misses like the first 2 words that I spoke. I mean, maybe the first word. And
it's like the millennial pause in TikTok videos. It's like we're all conditioned for this like little delay.
Yeah. So I just think you need to like use the product a lot. And I just think I have a very clear sense of what I do and don't like.
So is there any like quantitative equivalent? Like as you're developing, do you like, are there things that you're measuring? Like, are you constantly watching the like frame drops? Are you like, is it really all just like, does this feel good or does it not feel good? Or is there like a number that you're trying to achieve from a performance monitor?
Not quite a number we're trying to achieve. The frame monitor is useful if we have issues, but no, I would actually describe this whole experience so far, at least, as being much more qualitative. I think there are some very obvious quantitative things you can do, like startup time, and to me, it's always been like time to keyboard, because we're a chat app. So how long does it take to go from tapping the home screen to?
That's what you're trying to do when you're opening the app is like start typing. Yeah.
But other than that, I think we've just been very thoughtful about the things we add to the product, and of course, doing the obvious things like using the React compiler, just being smart about the way we program things and being very careful about how each screen and like every step of the way performance is considered. And I think there's just a lot of manual work that went into that and making sure that any trade-off we have, like one small example is our markdown parsing, even during streaming, is done on the server. And that's just, it was actually already done that way for V0. It's not like we added that for the mobile app, but that's just a little bit less work we have to do in the JS thread on the mobile side.
Yeah, I think there was a Twitter thread that got passed around our Slack, I know, about that markdown parser. That was a cool optimization.
So I think another thing I want to kind of bring up, probably just real quick, another strength of React Native is your ability to kind of share code between web and mobile. I know you all have v0.app as your web app. How did you structure the code sharing between the mobile app and the web app?
So we're in a monorepo with the web app. We originally actually had a number of issues doing this because the web app is a PNPM monorepo, and I had a lot of Metro issues, honestly, getting it working. Even after like the latest updates, it's been very difficult to get all the dependencies working properly. We ended up, basically, we have a few shared packages that we use between web and mobile, but the whole thing felt quite frail, getting the monorepo to work properly on the React Native side, whereas for web and like TurboPack, it all just worked much more seamlessly. So I think the monorepos over time have been like my biggest annoyance with the React Native side, especially just as like dependencies get more complicated. And at times it's a bit difficult to even describe why the issues are happening. And I've really, really dug in deep there. But that's like essentially our setup. We have like shared logic between the client and the website. The main thing, however, is the mobile app was in a way a forcing function to move more of our logic to the server generally.
Yeah.
I think that rather than sharing helper functions everywhere, it's more important to ask, why is this even running on the client? Yeah. And my goal was really to make the V0 front end be a very thin wrapper, and we're continually making that the case. I want all of our logic to live in the server in one place, and for the mobile app to just be a skin on top of that. And I think in the world of agents, that's proving to be more and more important, because there's not necessarily a reason to send them through your app or your website to do things. They just want the API, and you want that logic to be as unified as possible.
That's actually an amazing shout, because that's something that I'm currently working on in my client app. It's like, hey, we have all these helper functions, some are even overlapping and forcing others to do, bugs are coming up. It's like, hey, why am I getting this instead of that? It's like, well, we have all these helper functions doing all this business logic. Let's move those to the backend. Let's have the backend kind of do that heavy lifting for us. What's your state management that you're using, and is it shared between both web and mobile?
It's actually not shared. Our state management is primarily using React Query for data fetching. So anything that's async and that might request some level of caching, is queries and mutations, is React Query. For the rare cases we need global state, we use Zustand. I have a bit of an aversion overall to global state. I actually don't think it makes sense as a concept for most UI. I actually much prefer the dependency injection pattern of React context, because you can always easily override things on a scope basis. So we use context quite a bit. I wouldn't call that a state management as much as just a way to forward things down to underlying primitives. And I really like it as a dependency injection tool because we can very easily swap out state and action implementations in our context providers. So I gave a talk on this recently about React composition last year, and that embodies a lot of how we build features. We set up the schema first. What are the state variables? What are the actions that some feature is going to need? We generally start that in a provider, and then we build all these headless UI bits. And so that's how like most of the features we build look. And yeah, we don't have like a ton of context providers necessarily at the root of the app, but instead near where they need to get used.
That's a recipe for a bunch of unnecessary re-renders if you do it wrong.
Yes, I do think it's a pitfall. It's very easy to avoid. However, you can, first of all, just if you have children that pass through components, those won't re-render. So as long as each provider has its state that gets set within the provider, so if you have a provider that wraps your context and it updates its state there, its children won't re-render. So as long as you put all your providers in the root of the app and they just re-render themselves, React will actually just do like an object is comparison, I believe, where the props themselves haven't changed. So you don't even need memo or anything like that. So that's one optimization that comes, somewhat for free. Doing these like monolithic providers obviously have some render risk because every time you type, something can update. The React compiler is quite useful for that, but nonetheless, it's still, even though it'll optimize the inner renders, the parent component that gets memoized by the React compiler and listens to the context will still re-render. So there's some risk there, and for those cases, we actually do use something like a context selector or Zustand. So in our React Native skills that I released recently, one pattern I mentioned that I really like is, let's say you have a list, like you're using legend list or flash list, and you have items that might have some state that has to change that lives outside of the list. So you might have, my list of liked domains, for example. You have a domains list.
Yeah.
What we do is we have the state live outside of the list, and then each item just has a context selector to check for that. So only that item re-renders as opposed to recreating the entire list reference whenever that state variable changes. So I think there are a lot of optimizations of that kind that let you be much more granular with how state updates.
That's really cool. Speaking of legend list, flat list, the sort of like the list, you're talking about a chat app, which is essentially a list, and that's like the heart of your app. So I'm guessing choosing the right list and making it performant was super important. You ended up choosing legend list versus flat list, correct? And how did you, like, what were the trade-offs? Like, how did you evaluate? Like, what was it about the things that you didn't use that didn't work?
Legend list has been great. I think it is really nailing a lot of the things that we struggled with in the early days. Jay was also very down to collaborate and improve the library a lot, which was...
Jay is awesome. We've had him on the show.
Yeah, very key piece. We are actively collaborating on something new now where I'm trying to get legend list support for a new library we're working on as well. And yeah, I think we just shared a goal that this should work. And we saw a lot of success with it, more than basically any other library that we tried. There are a number of recipes that were difficult to get right, like scrolling to the end at the right time and things like that, especially with React's like async nature with rendering. It's all a bit tricky with like scrolling and firing off these events. I've thought way too much about this problem, I would say. And we're actually, this is a problem I'm trying to solve right now with an open source library with a team here. And I'm pretty excited about finally knocking it out and open sourcing something.
I'm looking forward to it. You should come back on the show to talk about that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. We're starting to kind of like run up towards the end of the time for the episode, but I think one question I'd like to kind of wrap up on is what's the future of the V0 app look like? What can people expect? As you come into Android, maybe instead of just building a web app, you can build a React Native app. Like, what's the future look like?
V0's mobile app and V0 generally started out as a prototyping tool, hence the name, a way to originally create ShadCN components and eventually React components of any kind and screens and eventually some Next.js prototypes. V0 is going towards a world where you can work on any repo of any kind, and we will actually spin up a sandbox for you and let you run commands inside of that sandbox. And the mobile app is going to be the extension of that, where you can actually at any time pull out your phone and contribute to real work and a real project that you've either started in V0 or elsewhere. For the time being, our preview experience is for any web app that you build, but we just added monorepo support, and we're actually letting you work on any real projects. And so we're going to continue improving that experience over the next few weeks to give you something that really never makes you feel like you're frustrated you walked away from your desk. Anytime you like have a good idea, you should be able to really quickly act on it and preview it. And even if you're building a mobile app and we don't quite have the preview flow inside of V0 itself, you'll actually still be able to create PRs and ask questions about how your repo works and point to any branch with a full Git integration.
That's awesome. So now no more singing in the showers, just talking to your V0 app in the shower to fix your PR or build that new web app that you've
when
been
you wake up in the
about.
middle of the night and you're like, I have to write this idea down, otherwise it'll be gone.
It's even useful, I've found, to like ask for like open source things I've built or random things that I've worked on, like how does this work again, or what do you have any ideas for why this might be broken? And it'll do a full deep investigation with Opus to try to figure out what's going on. It'll clone your repo. It can push PRs to it. It has the GitHub CLI, so it can actually look at why your CI is failing. It can look at prior pull requests. It can bisect. Like it's incredibly useful.
Yeah, that's awesome. Cool. Well, I think that's it we have for this episode. Thank you so much for coming on, Fernando. This was very helpful to kind of learn about how you all are doing this and kind of what's to come in the future.
We'll make sure to put the blog article as well as links to the RN skills that you created, and I think there's a UI primitives library that came out of this as well. We'll put all that in the show notes. Where can people find you or find like the V0 team if they have questions while they're testing this out?
We are on X. I'm Fernando Rojo on X and Nando Rojo on GitHub, if you're curious where I'm committing, but X is really where we live, and check out V0 on X as well.
Awesome. So usually I say, Robin, do you have a mom joke to let us out with?
I don't have one today.
So guess what? I have one.
Oh, you have one?
Yeah.
This is an original dad joke then.
Yeah. It is actually. My wife got me for Christmas a mug that has a QR code with a dad joke of the day. So it's
Nice.
one from every single day. This was Friday's joke, this past Friday's. Have you heard of the new sport called quiet tennis?
No.
It's like normal tennis, but without the racket.
That was a good one.
Thanks. I did
That was
good.
a good one.
Thanks, Robin. All right. Again, thank you, Fernando, and thank you all, and see you all next time.
Bye.
As always, thanks to our editor, Todd Worth, our assistant editor, Jed Bartosky, our marketing and episode release coordinator, Justin Husky, and our guest coordinator, Mazen Chami. Our producers and hosts are Jamin Holmgren, Robin Hines, and Mazen Chami. Thanks to our sponsor, Infinite Red. Check us out at infinite.red/radio. A special thanks to all of you listening today. Make sure to subscribe to React Native Radio on all the major podcasting platforms.